The time is now 12:30, so we'll begin our meeting. The meeting is now open to the public and we have started recording. We'll begin with an introduction to our Spanish interpretation, as well as our language justice statement from Valentina Cruz.
Thank you, Brandon. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Valentina, and I'm working with my colleague today, Itzel. We're both here on behalf of Community Language Cooperative, and I'm going to go ahead and read the Zoom instructions and the language justice statement first in Spanish and then in English. Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Valentina y estoy aquí con mi colega Itzel, ambas por parte de Community Language Cooperative. Y antes de comenzar, queremos asegurarnos de que todas y todos hayan seleccionado el idioma adecuado en Zoom. Si prefieren escuchar la presentación en español, hagan clic en el globito que aparece en la parte inferior de la pantalla de la computadora y seleccionen español bajo interpretación. Si están utilizando un teléfono celular o una tableta, hagan clic en los 3 puntos que están a la derecha donde dice More o Más y ahí pueden elegir español como el idioma de su preferencia. Las y los integrantes de la comunidad están invitados a hacer sus comentarios en español si así lo prefieren. Nuestra organización ha asumido el compromiso de fomentar la justicia lingüística. Invitamos a la comunidad a utilizar su idioma de preferencia para participar en esta sesión. Les agradecemos que hablen lenta y pausadamente y que utilicen palabras comunes para que sea más fácil la interpretación. Before we get started, we would like to direct everyone to the appropriate language channel on Zoom. If you prefer to listen in Spanish, please click on the small globe at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. If you are on a tablet or on a phone, click the 3 dots to the right of your screen that says More and select Spanish there. During the meeting, there may be community members who choose to give comments in Spanish. If you are not bilingual, you will need to select the English option to hear the interpretation. As an organization, we are committed to language justice. We would like to invite community members to participate in the meeting using their language of preference. In order to facilitate interpretation, please speak slowly, pause often, and use commonly understood vocabulary. Thank you very much. We can go ahead and start the interpretation channels now.
Thank you, Valentina. Language interpretation is now enabled. And Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Valentina and Brandon. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Colorado's 6th technical work session for 2024. Thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Scott Cassell. I'm the CEO and founder of the Product Stewardship Institute, and I am the facilitator for the advisory board. Again, today's meeting is a technical work session. We have a packed agenda for today, and we will be discussing 4 topics, as you see on the screen here. Material reporting categories. Topic 2, targets for minimum collection and minimum recycling rates. Number 3, offsets for producer dues, including non-MRF covered materials collection and exceedance of recycling rates. And the last topic, number 4, producer collaboration to incentivize design change. So the goal of today's meeting is to provide input to CAA, Circular Action Alliance, on these topics. And we will accept public comment following the 5-minute break after the first 2 topics. And again, we will have a public comment after the final 2 topics. So we're splitting them in half. 2 topics, public comment, 2 topics, public comment, then we'll wrap up. An electronic roll call will be taken today. We are not doing a verbal roll call because these are technical work sessions. So board members, please type your name and affiliation into the chat and be sure to send it to everyone. So I will, in a minute, turn it over to Pete to present on material reporting categories. Like the previous meetings, Pete has interspersed slides with the key questions for you to answer. So there's going to be ample time for questions and comments. So the first one has the most slides. Pete has 14 slides before getting to a few questions he has posed to you. So if you have some explanatory questions on your mind of any of the slides as he's going through them, just put up your hand and we'll have that question answered at that point. And now over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, and happy to answer questions as we go through. So the next number of slides provides a comparison of the proposed covered materials categories that were used in the needs assessment to the proposed reporting categories. And more than happy to talk about more details as we go through. I know that there was some questions about materials that potentially might cross over between the minimum recyclables list and the additional materials list. There is a few circumstances where this happens. Generally, it's related to differences in use or potentially some differences in potentially the format of that material, so the shape of that material. Again, I think as we look at this right now nationally, we are currently at between Colorado, California, and Oregon, we're at 144 reporting categories that producers would need to track if they were reporting into each of those jurisdictions. So there is some considerations we're trying to do, sort of ensure that we keep that overall number reasonable in order for producers to report into the 3 different states. So again, happy to chat about that as we go through. So next slide. So I've broken out the materials as we go forward into paper, metal, rigid, flexible, plastics, glass, and then other materials. We did also do just a bit of a comparison here as to the amount of materials that were on the proposed covered materials list to those that were in the proposed reporting categories. So it gives you some idea as to some of the differences that have been made in. There are some other categories that we've added. So the plastic other, we have added that category. That's why you see 0 under the proposed covered materials list and 2 under the proposed reporting categories. And I can speak a bit to that as we go through the slides. But again, 70 proposed covered materials that were included in that initial list, and then 52 proposed reporting categories that we have in the list currently right now proposed for reporting categories. Next slide. So again, we'll start with sort of paper and paper products reporting categories. So we have proposed that aseptic and gable top cartons be included as one proposed category. Initially in the covered materials list, that was 2 separate categories. I know this, the advisory board had discussions back and forth on this one. They are both on the minimum recyclables list. So we don't necessarily see a value necessarily in breaking those out as reporting categories. So we have included them as one category that is similar to the approach that we are taking in the other 2 jurisdictions as well. No change to corrugated cardboard. That is one category as it was before. Same with craft paper. Just a slight change from craft packaging to craft paper. Magazines, catalogs, and directories. We did change this category slightly to include both, before it was magazines and other coated paper and bound directories. Both of those are on the minimum recyclables list. We didn't see any necessarily issue with combining those categories as a reporting category moving forward. Carolyn?
Good afternoon, Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. Peter, I wonder if we could pause to just add a little bit additional context to make sure that we're sort of, understanding all the information you're sharing. Could you please provide a little bit more clarity of what the headers in this table mean, of what category 1 and category 2 are? And the proposed covered material list, are those the material categories that we had talked through previously that are represented in the materials we're covering? So if you can just orient us to those
Correct, yeah.
categories.
So, yeah, the proposed covered materials list was developed as part of the needs assessment. It was a way of differentiating the types of materials that potentially are included in the program and that would be processed. I think all along that we talked about the fact that that was not necessarily the reporting categories that would be chosen. The proposed recording category 1 and 2, we did include those because there are some products here where we're looking potentially at breaking out materials. So they may actually fit into 2 categories, some of the materials from that initial covered materials list. And so this is just to reflect that instead of just 1 category, it may be actually 2 categories that we're splitting that initial covered material list into. So it was a way to try to show that there is potentially more than 1 category. So for example, for newspaper and newsprint, we had 1 category set up for those materials. And as part of the reporting categories, we have proposed 2 separate categories, 1 for newspapers and 1 for newsprint. So we have separated those 2 out, partially because there are different requirements for newspaper and newsprint, and so that we had broken those 2 out into separate categories.
Okay.
And then the proposed collection is just whether they were on the minimum recyclables list, whether they were on the additional materials list, or potentially whether they weren't proposed to be collected on either one of those 2 lists. So we've just provided it. That's just more meant to provide a little bit of context as to if there was differences in the reporting categories around how potentially they would be the cost potentially would be the dues would be applied to them.
Thank you. And may I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
So is it safe to say at some point here through the process, the proposed covered material list, that will go away? And the reporting categories that are listed as in either column 1 or 2, those would be the only material categories moving forward, if we're sort of like forecasting how this gets used.
Yeah, I mean, I think the proposed covered material list was a way to assess potentially how materials were being managed within the system. As I said before, that list is not necessarily what we would use to communicate to the public, nor what we would be asking people to report into. So I think, yes, the covered list still acts as a way potentially to let producers know what they potentially could be obligated to report on. But again, I don't think it really becomes a public communication piece.
Yeah, so functionally, it sounds like maybe it's used as for additional clarity if needed, sort of behind the scenes, but it doesn't. It's functionally the items category 1 and category 2 are what? Those are the categories that everything would happen around, but the reporting would happen around. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be dominating time, but I wonder if I can ask one more just sort of context setting question. And sorry, I forgot to say my name again, Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. So Peter, one of the other things that we had talked about at the last meeting was how when there's one reporting category and it covers some materials that will be handled in one way and some materials that will be handled in another way. So, we could take any one of the examples in here, but maybe a material that includes a category that has something from the minimum recyclables list and something from the additional, or something that's not accepted at all. Could you sort of walk us through how CAA will be using these reporting categories in this and in how it applies to where there are materials going different directions? And also, if CAA is going to be reporting out on any of these material categories and how those sort of split uses within a single material category would be addressed.
Yeah, so these categories are used to help us establish dues. So they would be used for that purpose. They would be bulked into larger material categories for measuring of targets. How much is collected, how much is recycled. So that is the purpose. And I see Wolf has his hand up, so I will let him interject if.
Thanks, Pete.
Okay, Wolf, you're on.
Yeah, thanks, Pete and Scott. So I just want to be careful here, Wolf Cray, CDPHE, with framing this discussion on our terminology, because the minimum recyclables list, the additional materials list, those are things that we have directly called out in the regulations. It's something that needs to be included in the plan. It's something that needs to be included in the annual report. So before we go too far down this road and saying that it's something that might get phased out, I did just want to interject and make sure that that's really not the case, because the minimum recyclables list and the additional materials list are things that need to be
Sure,
detailed and used as we go forward here.
Yeah, that's fair, Wolf. But again, it's not necessarily something that would be public in the sense of the communication of how you would communicate what you put in your recycling bin or not. But I take the point. Sorry, and I guess the question of dues, which I think was the second part, Carolyn, of your question. Yeah, there is. So I think we would be looking to apply the cost to manage based on the cost that material would have, and we've talked about that to some extent. But there is, I guess, some question. If we take a material like a molded pulp, either food serviceware or just molded pulp packaging, there's a question to some degree about how costs would be differentiated between the two. One is on the minimum recyclables list and one is on the additional materials list. And I think that's where I mentioned there is a difference in use. Those products would largely flow through a material recycling facility in exactly the same way. But there are concerns with molded pulp serviceware because of potential contamination that's associated with it. And I think that's why most facilities aren't taking that material. Is there a difference potentially? I guess potentially you could work out the additional contamination cost that's associated with it. But I think for our purposes, we're looking at treating those materials in the same way.
Okay, Caroline, thank you for those clarification questions. Do you have one quick follow-up?
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's something that is where I don't want to take up all of our meeting time, but I feel like I still don't fully understand. I hear you that the categories will be used for establishing producer dues, and I hear you saying that, in the example of, say, the other paper packaging where you have 3 items that go in the minimum recyclables list and 1 that goes in the additional materials list and isn't accepted by most MRFs right now. It is interesting to me that those would be blended together for the purpose of creating producer dues. If I were a producer of something on the MRL, I would probably rather not be bundled in with something that costs more to handle or that isn't on the MRL, but I don't really know all the details of that. And I absolutely understand that none of these categories are for public education. That's a whole separate animal. So I think, I know we went through a lot of conversation around that last fall, but I think everybody acknowledges that's separate from this. But I guess I'm still beyond the producer dues. You know, as Wolf is talking about, we have the minimum recyclables list, and I don't really know exactly all of the mechanisms, but it seems like CAA will need to track materials, I guess, that are on the minimum recyclables list for internal purposes, maybe for reporting out to the public or CDPHE. And I guess I still just don't understand how that happens if materials going different and they're either not collected on the AML or on the additional materials list or the minimum recyclables list. If they're bundled together, I just don't understand how they're used beyond the dues creation application.
Yeah, so I mean, I think these categories are largely for setting dues, and they're largely set for measuring against targets that are in the plan. So targets are based on high-level categories: paper, glass, flexibles, rigid metals. So they're based on those level of categories. So obviously these get collapsed into those higher level categories for that purpose. But otherwise the reporting side is for establishing producer dues.
Okay, thank you, Caroline, for those important clarifications. And I think we can go into it some more if we have time later. But we do have two other hands up, one from Rick and one from Clinton. Rick?
Hi, Rick Cater, Swordfish Consulting, Murphs. To follow up on what Caroline's talking about, last week I wasn't able to articulate my concerns, and I thought about this while I was after the call. And one of the things that I don't want us to miss out on is, like you mentioned, the category of flex film, for instance, and there are different categories of flex film. And some of those flex films are identified as a no-go. And you want to bundle these into one category, and let's just say it's called flex film. And we no longer then are tracking if it's PET flex film, PVC flex film, or any of the other subcategories of that flex film. And I couldn't articulate before, but I think we should know whether or not packaging folks are gravitating to PVC, for instance, versus polypro, or to PET instead of polypro. I think you'd want to see that kind of granular detail so that you can actually see whether or not they're defaulting to less expensive and more toxic resin types like PVC in lieu of upgrading to another type of flex film. So I think that's important, Peter, that we see that kind of use and we can see what they're gravitating to in terms of what type of resin types are being used in packaging. That's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Rick. I guess there's a question. Is that what was intended in the legislation? And if so, why didn't they spell out specifically all of the various categories that needed to be reported? I mean, essentially right now we are creating categories largely. So for flexible films, films that are not accepted on the minimum recyclables list are separated out from those that are, or I guess there's only flexibles that are on the additional materials list. So there is some separation that's provided there already. So it's, again, it's just a question of to what end is additional reporting requirements needed to meet the intent of the legislation.
Understood. Thank you.
Clinton?
Sorry. Yeah, Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. You hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Just confirming. Thank you. Peter, I'm just curious, and maybe that you're going to explain this in a minute. But like, for example, with the craft packaging, and you got grocery bags on there, and let's just say we're talking about lawn craft bags as well. So so would those be for dues and tracking targets to see what's collected and recycled? that type of craft bag would fall into that proposed covered material list for tracking. But its exit strategy would be being composted versus going through recycling process, but it could be recycled as well. So now you got two potential end markets for that craft bag. I'm just wondering, how is that tracked, or is this just kind of all thrown into it's been recycled?
Thanks, Glenn. I think the question of and we do have separate categories associated with compostable plastics and paper type materials. So I think the intent and the way that we would define those as part of the reporting categories is if you are marketing yourself as a compostable, you would report under that compostable category. So I think that's the way that we would deal with that, the issue of certain types of material that might be that I guess potentially could be both compostable and recyclable, is that if it is marketed as compostable, it would report under the compostable category.
So Pete, even if it's recyclable and compostable, the two together would be under the compostable category?
Correct. I think that's what we're currently looking at as the proposed approach. Because they can't report under two categories, they have to report under one category. And yeah, I mean, typically there are some products that can go both ways. But I think we're thinking that the majority, if they are labeling themselves as compostable, will likely move in that direction.
Great, thanks. Great questions here, really important.
Perfect. And I'll just pause for just a second and see if there's anyone else that has questions. I don't see any. So again, I think I mentioned paper for general use it would remain the same. Paperboard, although it doesn't say paperboard boxes and packaging, it would include all of those materials, and those would be defined in the reporting guidance. Next slide over. So paper laminates, we are proposing a separate category for other paper laminates. That would include wax-coated corrugated cardboard, which is currently not proposed to be collected. It would include paper laminates, and those materials are currently on the additional materials list. They are collected, I think, in small areas, again, not widespread. And then also including spiral wound containers with steel ends, which are on the additional materials list as well. So we're collapsing those categories together. Oh, sorry, Wolf.
Okay, thanks, Pete. So I think this is a great example here of a part that could use some clarification. So if we have something that's on the additional materials list and another type of material that isn't collected or isn't eligible for collection, those two different types of materials would need to have different dues based on ecomodulation, right? Like if it's not recyclable, it's going to have a different due rate than something that is on the additional materials list. So help me understand how wax paper not on the list versus like a paper laminate or paper cans could be aggregated together. I think that needs some, yeah, I'm a little confused on that.
Yeah, again, Wolf, I think we were trying to create categories of similar types of products. And again, trying to reduce the amount of dues. I'm not sure if actually we have a requirement for any state to have a separate category for wax corrugated cardboard. So again, we could potentially break this material out, but it would move us from 144 to 145 of the amount of categories that producers might be tracking in the different states.
Okay, so again, just trying to work through this.
Yep.
If it's not recyclable, it seems like it needs to be parsed out from anything that would be on the AML or MRL. So maybe that means there's like an aggregated, other paper non-recyclable, but that would have to be separate from an other paper additional materials list or MRL list.
Okay. We'll take that back and have a look at it, Wolf.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk through that further, but I just seems like those are three very different things: MRL, AML, and something that's not eligible that we can't aggregate.
Yeah, I mean, currently this just includes materials that are on the additional materials list and the not collected list.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Wolf, if I or Scott, if I could weigh in really quick, this is first of all, thank you for the feedback. It's great because this is the feedback we're seeking. Second, this discussion of the AML and the MRL and the dues and eco-modulation reporting categories is an actively ongoing conversation that we're having internally too. Because you have looking at how we assure that we hit the eco-modulation factors or requirements and due setting with these combined categories could be a potential challenge. So this yeah, maybe we do have to break those apart, the MRL and the AML, to be able to properly set those dues. We've talked about, could there be an exception, like is there a sub-reporting category to allow us to do that, which we've seen in other jurisdictions, particularly the France program. They've done some sub-report. They have larger material reporting categories, eco-modulation as subcategories. So we're looking at some different options, but that is definitely one of the concerns, Wolf, that you've called out. And you too, Caroline, same concern.
Yuri and Pete, is one of the concerns the actual impact of keeping them together versus separating, meaning how much of how much additional cost would those that are collecting under the MRL or AML have to bear? Is that part of the calculation from your end?
Go ahead, Pete.
I was going to say, I think the calculation is largely about just trying to make sure that we're keeping the amount of reporting categories to something that's manageable for producers moving forward in a coherent manner. I think that's really what it fits to. We're 3 states in, 144 categories for a producer to track every year. Is a lot of categories to potentially have. As you add more programs and more nuances, you're adding to that total of materials around what each producer needs to break out and then report in. And there's more chance, obviously, for mistakes to be made as the list grows. So the next piece is just on, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to say, not seeing any hands up. Keep moving. Thank you.
For other paper packaging, I think I've mentioned this one already. We have included a packaging paper, molded pulp packaging that excludes food serviceware, molded pulp serviceware, and non-metallized gift wrap in the same reporting category. And again, I would note that there obviously is some difference here between the minimum recyclables list and the additional materials list, both being on this. But again, I think there is that concern about, I mean, some of it's a logical type of thing where I would say to you, a molded pulp egg carton can easily have food contamination on it. A drink tray could easily have no contamination on it. So there is a bit of a differentiation in this list that to some degree makes it not necessarily that practical as to the potential impacts. So would there be a large difference in MRF costing when it comes to non-food serviceware versus food serviceware? And if we were going to take that same principle, we could start applying it all over the place because we would be creating potentially food serviceware categories for every type of material set that we include into this list. So there is a bit of a concern I think we have around how do we wrap our hands around that as part of reporting categories when we start to get into potential different uses for packaging and the amount of categories that may be included as a result. Next slide. Polycoated paper, we have included paper cups, coated and uncoated, as well as other polycoated packaging in the same category. They are both being managed under the additional materials list. We thought these materials had a fair amount of similarities to them in including them into one category. We don't have a category specifically proposed for shredded paper, because obviously shredded paper would be supplied as paper, not shredded. So there is not a specific category for this. We will have a separate category for paper small format, which could include things like paper tea bags. It could include smaller items to tags that potentially might be included on items. So we would have a small paper format, but obviously shredded paper is really more of an output. It comes out as a piece of paper, and then at some point somebody would shred it. For other printed materials, we have bulked together low-grade printing and writing paper, as well as other printed paper, which would include things like flyers and brochures and calendars. Both of those are on the minimum recyclables list. And that is it for the paper and paper product category. So happy to stop briefly if there were any questions. Next slide then. So under the proposed rigid plastic reporting categories, the first two we've kept the same, which is clear natural HDPE and color HDPE. We have created a separate category for HDPE other rigid items, and that would include other polyethylene packaging, except pails and lids and squeezables, and then polyethylene squeezable tubes. And again, there is a difference between these. One is on the minimum recyclables list and one is on the additional materials list. The issue to some degree with tubes is this is more of a kind of format question. There is some difficulty I think we have as to what extent potentially do we look at breaking out the various types of formats of types of packaging that might be potentially put into the market. Because I think as you look at each category, you may very well end up breaking more finitely into categories. And so we've kept it as one reporting category. Carolyn?
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. Is there a scenario where MRFs are going to, I know these material categories are primarily being focused on right now for the dues setting process. As we move through the process, will MRFs or other, drop-off centers, other locations need to report out? And if so, would they report into these same categories?
No, Carolyn. The detail, MRFs would not be able to provide the amount of detail that we're including in these reporting categories. I don't think there's any MRF that separates their materials out into 51 or 52 different categories. So no, there might be some of these that might be more corresponding to the types of bales that are being produced. But even then, you may end up with some mixed paper bales that might capture different materials in them. So there wouldn't be the ability to specifically line these up as they're being reported necessarily into the same degree of detail.
Yeah, as you say that, I guess that makes sense. I guess my brain was still stuck on the thinking about shredded paper being sort of an output and not being reported on. Just thinking through operationally if there are any, because it is its own material on the additional materials list. So I guess maybe a lot of these questions still keep circling around the I think maybe my baseline feedback continues to be it feels like materials that are on either the minimum recyclables list or the additional materials list feel like they should have their own reporting category because specific things will be happening around them. And maybe shredded papers, I was just thinking through the shredded paper some more. And so I know we've already moved on there. I was just trying to catch up.
I think it's a good question, Carolyn. I think, as we thought about it, like, you could never get a producer to report on the amount of shredded paper because they don't put shredded paper into the marketplace, right? And they have no ability to affect who decides to have a shredder at home and uses it for their materials, right? So you wouldn't be able to ever get any proper detail back on that as part of it. We were just trying to recognize it because we know that there are people that will shred paper at home, and that will end up potentially wanting to make its way back into the recycling system. And obviously, programs right now currently take that material, usually through drop-off programs. Okay. Pails and buckets, HDPE pails and buckets, we have kept the same. We have added an additional category as well for polypropylene containers, cups, lids, plates, trays, and tubs. So some of those materials, because we had a large HDPE and a PP pail, so we've created 2 separate categories for those materials. So we have created an LDPE, other rigid items. So that could include the LDPE colored nursery containers that we had brought forward in the proposal. It may include other types of LDPE rigid plastics. Again, there will be other formats of LDPE rigid plastics that are in the program. So it expands out that LDPE category than just dealing with LDPE colored nursery containers. We have included as well a category for LDPE bottles, jars, and jugs. We did not have a category for that under the proposed covered material list. You can get things like, I'm thinking like the honey containers, the squeezable honey containers that are in LDPE format. So those types of materials, those squeezable types of bottles that potentially might fit under that category. Next slide. So the first is the same, PET bottles and jugs, clear, and then we've got opaque that falls under it. So those would remain the same as what were on the covered materials list. PET other rigid containers, cups, lids, plates, and trays would combine both PET thermoform containers, clear and opaque. So there is a difference here. One is on the minimum recyclables list, one is on the additional materials list. So there is, I guess, a question as to whether we need to break those out. But we have, at least for now, proposed one category. We have added an additional category for PET other rigid items. So there is some thinking that there might be some other materials out there. And I think I used the examples of hangers and clips in a few places, but you might get hangers that might be included that are made of, PET, that might get that are service packaging that's provided, that's attached to or that are used to for clothing, for the selling of clothing. So there might be some of those products that might fit on the additional materials list, some of those materials that might not be collected. There is, again, a bit of a difficulty with this category, that there might be a bunch of different types of materials that might be captured or not captured. And Rick, before you say anything, let me be very clear. I understand that hangers are not taken in any recycling program out there. Just more highlighting the fact that they might be considered service packaging that might be provided with the product.
Rick?
Rick Cater, Swordfish Consulting. Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to make sure your folks, I don't know that what the chemistry of thermoform is. I know that we're only allowed a certain amount of bottle stock in there, or either way. And I was wondering if you knew that these other rigid containers, cups, lids, plates, trays, and tubs, are you implying that those are all of the same chemistry as thermoform?
No, not necessarily, Rick. I think it would capture some other types of materials, but I think largely the focus is on thermoforms, which would cover most of those types of materials.
Just thinking from an end market and marketing perspective, once thermoform gets turned on and we get more of it, how much other stuff are we allowed to mix in with thermoform to still be able to sell thermoform? I've never had to work through that dilemma, but just wondering if you guys have. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rick. And we're certainly looking at that right now and having active conversations with end markets around thermoforms. This is an issue that we're dealing with across states. And then we have for polypropylene, we have added actually, so we proposed that for reporting categories that we'd have a polypropylene containers, cups, lids, plates, trays, tubs, a polypropylene bottles, jugs, and jars, and a polypropylene other items, as opposed to the two that were originally proposed, which was polypropylene packaging and polypropylene nursery containers. So we've broken that out a little bit further based on the various requirements. The nursery containers gets into another use factor. It's very similar if I think about it when we compare to food service ware. Essentially, you're trying to put something on it because it's the use. It's the what makes it difficult. Those containers to be able to recycle is largely the soil potentially that remains in those containers, that they aren't properly cleaned, and so there's really a concern on that side. So it's more of a use factor, and regardless of the type of material that we're talking about, regardless of the type of resin that we're talking about, the issue with those nursery containers will still remain the same, that it's the fact that there's soil potentially associated with that material that potentially impacts its ability to be able to be sorted and recycled properly. So I guess, there is a question I have in my head as to, are we using that same, I mean, we could end up with this same type of situation with other types of products as well, where they just don't necessarily clean as easily, or aren't necessarily as clean when they're put into the recycling bin. Next slide. So the next categories, we have proposed two separate categories for polystyrene. We've included an expanded foamed hinge containers, plates, cups, tubs, trays, and other foamed containers, and then a polystyrene other expanded and foamed forms. The latter is more really to deal with things like the types of packaging that you would get coming with electronics types of packaging, and the former more dealing with, again, your food service ware types of packaging. We had broken that out a little bit differently in the needs assessment, because we talked about white expanded polystyrene and colored expanded polystyrene. There are ways we could break both those two categories out, I guess, into colored and non-colored. I'm assuming the majority of the food expanded polystyrene is not actually processed right now. So we may just need to break the polystyrene other expanded and foam forms into two, a white and a colored. So we could potentially look at that and making that change. But again, I think we're still having some internal conversation about that and would appreciate any feedback from all of you on that side.
Any feedback this time while Pete's asked for it specifically?
Okay, and then we have a
Wolf is under the buzzer. He's got it.
Sorry about that, Pete. I don't know if I have feedback, but I have more of a question from CAA's perspective on all this. And I certainly understand the purpose here of trying to streamline things to minimize the number of categories. I guess my question is, like, how does what we're developing right here for Colorado on reporting categories fit with reporting categories for other states? Oregon, California, other folks that would need to be also, and understand we have a different list of covered materials, but like what's already being developed in other states, and how does that harmonize or tie in with things like this where you might need to for EPS?
So there's so we can come back with those lists. And are you just asking specifically, Wolf, to polystyrene or generally?
A little bit of both. I think this is a good example, right? Like,
yeah,
would you need to draw that line and have two categories in California or Oregon for this, or has that not yet been decided? And are we using Colorado as the first situation to really provide feedback here, or do you already have something that CAA needs to adhere to with other states for something like this?
Yeah, so California, CalRecycle developed the reporting categories. And I want to say there's about 94 reporting categories in total. Their total is much higher because they require, for a lot of the packaging, if there's any type of plastic attachment, you need to report on if it is a paper product with a plastic component. So they have separate reporting categories for those, which increases the amount of materials out substantially. Oregon has some separate reporting categories based on some of the differences in how they require reporting, Wolf. So if there is materials that need to be collected specifically at drop-off, those are broken out. And as I said, Colorado has some differences because, from Oregon specifically, because we have the compostable packaging requirements that are different than Oregon. So we're trying to match up to some degree things that don't necessarily match up. California doesn't include paper products. So there's some differences there as well. So I think what we're trying to do is be able to show quite easily to producers, here are all of the reporting categories, and here's the categories that you would have to report to each state to make it easy for them to manage. They're going to have to collect all of this data, so they need to track it. So if there are two categories of polystyrene in Colorado, and there's 6 different categories in California, that we just need to make sure that they understand what those reporting categories are and how they're supposed to track and report that information in. Liz.
Thanks, Wolf. Liz, you're up next.
Thank you. Liz Chapman, Recycle
You
Colorado.
have some, Liz, sorry, you have some background noise.
I thought that might be the case. I will put my question in the chat.
Go ahead, speak loudly and just.
Okay. So my question is, as you referenced, Pete, in California, there are a number of packages that have multiple materials. And I know I came in late, so you may have already said this, but in this reporting categories, if there's a product that has multiple materials, is there guidelines to how the producer will report it, that package in which category? Is it a matter of if 60% of it fits into category 1, that's will they'll report, or will there be a whole separate category for mixed material packaging?
Thanks, Liz. There will be guidance that will be provided to the producers as to how they report for each of these, or for the packaging they're putting into the marketplace. So if there is potentially packaging that has different types of material associated with it, then they would report on those different types of materials. There is some I mean, there's categories for things like Tetra Pak that are multiple materials. There's categories for multi-laminates that would fit under those multi-laminate categories. So there are separate categories as well for multi-materials.
Liz, just for your information, Pete did talk about before that for a certain material that can be composted or recycled, or there's composting and recycled. There's going to be one category that they report on. So whether it's composting or recycling, there will be one category from that. So it's related to your question a little bit.
Yeah,
and Pete, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we don't want producers to report in two separate categories, because then we're sort of double counting. So an example, under metal, we could have a producer that's putting a pressurized container into the marketplace. We don't want them reporting on that as well as reporting into the aluminum packaging category. We want them reporting into one specific category. Sorry,
do you have a chart, or Yuri, do you have a chart that lists like how you're matching up the states, back to Wolf's question about, like which ones are totally aligned, which ones are kind of different, and which ones you're wrestling with? Is that something you're able to share with this group?
Yeah, there's still a bit of flux, Scott, in Oregon, as I understand it. I don't know fully. I need to double check with the team, but I know there had been some back and forth on some of the reporting categories in Oregon. As I said, in California, they're landed. So we have a mapping piece that's been put together that we are trying to finalize. There is still some discussion around it, because there's always weird examples of things that the question is, where does this thing fit? So I think we're still having some internal discussion around some of those, but I think we can certainly share that map across the 3 states.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for the group. Great. Okay.
Sorry, we had I'll just move down to the next. So we have created an other mixed rigid plastic. Sorry.
Clinton, go ahead.
Sorry, I just got hi, Clinton Sanders. Oh, wait.
Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. So I didn't want to get that echo on you guys. So
Thanks.
Peter, so like back to the landscape plastic molded material that would have, potential soil contamination in it, so it can't be recycled. So obviously that's a type of packaging that makes it challenging to recycle. So you have an individual category for it to report out if it's being produced. But are you saying, will it be tracked for collection as well? Or if it is, you know what I'm saying, is like, how do we, in a bigger grand scheme of things, how do we move in a direction where potentially that type of packaging is just not good packaging, needs to change so it fits into this system? And if it's not, like, do you follow me? Is it trackable so that we know we get away from a potential piece of packaging that's just not beneficial anymore?
So, I mean, I think to give you the example, I mean, I don't necessarily know if it means that it's not recyclable. So, I mean, I know that the conversation around pizza boxes has gone on for eons.
Yeah,
but I think
good
there's,
example.
I think there's generally more consent that, you know, those pizza boxes can be recycled. Likewise, you'll end up with food serviceware potentially. Some of it may, I guess it depends what it's holding, as to potentially how, you know, much, let's say in a Canadian context, how much poutine was in it and how much gravy and cheese had been stuck to it. But you may very well have other materials, like, as I said, you know, those molded pulp coffee trays that likely don't have any contamination on them, and that can quite easily be recycled. So, you know, in a category like that, I guess I struggle a little bit with, you know, that cup tray as an example, I'm assuming can be easily recycled. Are we are we penalizing that because it's not on the minimum recyclables list because there's a use issue associated with it? As I said, with nursery packaging, again, I don't necessarily think any type of plastic resin will deal with that issue of you know, ensuring that it's cleaned out. So you're always going to deal with a little bit of that issue. It may be more of a collection factor as to how that material is dealt with.
Gotcha.
So again, I mean, you can get all kinds of things that this would fit
Yeah.
with. I mean, the ability to clean a peanut butter jar out is probably another great example where you'd say, should we penalize peanut butter jars if they're made of anything other than glass, because they're you know, they potentially come with more residuals attached to them. So like, I think you can start, and you could, I mean, there's an endless amount of potential examples that could be provided where, again, I think it how many categories are we going to include?
Yeah, and again, follow-up question, Clinton Center, A1 Organics. But I think it's really important. I think this goes back to a lot of our other statements ago. I know that we don't want to put too much on the producers for what they need to track, but having the data points on the type of packaging that is problematic could potentially lead to an opportunity for a solution on collection and processing versus. Do you follow? Like you said, like you had a great example with the paper cup thing. Like, if we know how many is going into the market, if it's significant, holy cow, we need to support this and make sure we can recycle it well, versus if we don't know and there's only a few, well, then maybe that's just not a product that's necessary to have, and we can move on in that direction.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's ways for us to show as part of our reporting, which is what is the percentage of material that's being supplied into the marketplace that can be that's part of the minimum recyclables list versus the additional materials list versus the not collected. And I won't get myself into trouble because that's not a list, but I think we could potentially show, because the whole intent is to move more materials, whether it's by influencing design or whether it's by influencing the infrastructure that's in place, to push more materials onto those that are actively being recycled within the state. So I think there's ways within these categories, absolutely, for us to do that.
All right, we're gonna have to pick up the pace a little bit more to get to our
Sorry.
2:15 break. No, that's all right. Public comment at 2:15-ish. So we've got a number of slides left. So over to you, Pete.
Yeah, so the other mixed rigid plastics, so we've added this category. We did have a separate category for PLA, PHA, and PHB, which were non-certified compostable. We've broadened this out because there are other potential materials that might get caught that might be under like a RIC code 7, which is sort of other plastics. So we've included them in that list to create a broader other mixed rigid plastic category. We have included, and this is under, we'll talk about this under flexible and rigid, but we've created another separate category, which would be under other plastic, would be small format plastic. So this is any packaging less than 2 inches by 2. So again, you could have little sachet types of things that are included, or small containers. So we're including that in a broad sort of other plastics category. And none of those are proposed to be collected under either the additional materials list or the minimum recyclables list. Next slide. We have included a rigid, a PVC rigid item category that was not included in our original list. So we are proposing to add that. That would not be a collected material, but something we think should be added. We do have a category already for PET jugs, bottles, and jars. I think I've. Sorry. This is no. I think I've by mistakenly double copied a few of these. So we've talked about, I think, already the PET bottles, jars, and the other categories on this slide. My apologies. Next slide over. For flexible categories, we have obviously the HDPE, LDPE, flexible film, and flexible and film items. That is the same as we had before. We have included polypropylene flexible and film item lists. That was not included in the previous one, so we are proposing to include that. And then we have bulked together the other plastic laminates and other flexibles that we had included, so we had a number of categories for that: PLA, PHA, PHB, multi-material films, PVC films, PET films, and polypropylene woven film. So we are, those are all not collected under the program, so we're proposing to move those into just one separate category for plastic laminates and other flexibles. As I mentioned again, we have added a separate category under other plastic that would include small format. Again, that would get blended together with the rigid side. And again, that would capture potentially things like plastic tea bags or plastic packaging that is less than 2 inches by 2. And not both of those are not collected currently in either of the two lists. We're not included. Next slide. Just moving into glass reporting categories. So the glass categories have remained the same. We did move ceramics onto the glass category list. I know that we did have some conversation with Scott around whether it should be collected under other or under the glass list. Again, I think we've just moved it under the reporting category for glass because that's really sort of more of what it sort of fits with. Rick?
Sorry, Rick Hader, Swordfish Consulting. Is there a particular reason why you felt it important, which I agree, to carve out PVC rigid and not PVC film?
I think this revolves around, Rick, what's required in some of the other states. So again, we're trying to sort of keep some consistency in categories. And so because that PVC rigid was getting isolated in the other jurisdictions, we thought we might as well isolate it here as well.
I think it must have something to do with its toxicity or its reputation for being a toxic resin type, but I just think it should be considered. Thanks.
No problem. Next slide. Metal categories, again, aluminum aerosol containers, we've kept the same. Aluminum containers, we've just bulked non-beverage containers and beverage containers together. They're both on the minimum recyclables list. The aluminum foil, we have kept the same. We have created a new category for metal small format. So you might get metal closures, caps, and lids. That it was not included before. But we would be looking to include that in the reporting categories. We have, as opposed to just the other metal packaging category, we have included steel other forms. So that could be, again, clips or strapping that could be included. And then aluminum other forms, so clips and strapping would be examples of those types of products. And then the other three categories, steel aerosol containers, steel containers, and pressurized cylinders, we've kept as the same. Next slide. For proposed compostable reporting categories, we have added one additional category. So we've broken paper into certified to ASTM 8410, and then we've included as well a plastic and polymer coated substrates, which is certified to ASTM 6868. So just making sure that we're capturing all forms of packaging. All those materials are not collected, but we wanted to make sure that we were capturing all those definitions. Next slide. For other reporting categories, we have, and this is largely based on some of the requirements in Oregon. We've created a plastic packaging category for hazardous or special products. And again, that would sort of cover any plastic containers for consumer products regulated under the Federal Hazardous Substance Act, and displaying words like danger, poison, warning, caution, and one of the following hazards: toxics, highly toxic, corrosive, flammable, highly flammable, or combustible. So we had categories that were included in the covered materials list that included paint containers, motor oil containers, solvent containers, pesticide containers, and antifreeze containers. Again, some of those, I think, as we've done more work, would probably not have been covered materials. We will remove those. Antifreeze containers, for example, would be caught under the Poison Prevention Packaging Act, and therefore under the Colorado legislation be exempt. So there are some of that would probably follow with some of the pesticide containers that are out there, as well as some of the solvent containers. So a number of these materials may be exempt within the actual statute. So we're focusing on those that are currently included. Paint as well. There are some of those paint containers that would be exempted under the current paint care program in Colorado. For wood and other organics, so we've combined the wood packaging and the textile packaging categories together to simply be one category for wood and other organics. Both of those sets of materials are not collected currently. And then for rubber packaging, it would be broken into two separate categories. If it's a flexible, it would be paper laminate or plastic laminates and other flexible packaging. If it was a rigid, it would fit under other mixed rigid plastics. Next slide over. I think that might be the last in this section.
Yep. So we've
So
gone
sorry
through
to take so long on that.
a bit of this. We've gone through quite a bit of this. We do have some time here for a couple of questions because the next section is just is much shorter. So Caroline.
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. I guess maybe just some sort of overarching comments on this topic, and then one question. So I absolutely hear you that like there are a lot of material categories, and 145 sounds like a whole lot, and it's hard to know exactly what is the, what's an appropriate number. If like, is 150 too many? But anyhow, too many can feel like sort of a challenging goal to try and avoid. But from my perspective, it feels like the operational use of the category, and especially separating out the minimum recyclables list and the alternative recyclable list materials, feels like an important driver in the conversation. And I'm also thinking about, I'm wondering if one of the outcomes of EPR and eco-modulation might be more harmonization of packaging types into more of the materials that are on the MRL over time that could help producers simplify their reporting over time. Again, I say this as a total out. I do not know the world of the packagers and the producers. So just from my lens comment. And my question is, I know we were talking briefly about some of the mixed material packaging, and I appreciate that we don't want material to be double counted. One example I'm thinking about is we receive at our drop-off center a fair amount of cardboard with styrofoam glued onto it. So I feel like some of the answers we were talking about are like the mixed layer packaging, which is multi-material in one packaging that is kind of its own thing. But this is two very distinct items that are together as one package. Or say there was a package that had like a label attached to it, and that you had that was a, like X material with Y material attached to it as a label or as a tag. How would those materials be reported out, and so I guess the first question is, how would those materials be reported out? And the second is, I think we know from the recycler's lens that those mixed materials stuck together make recycling either of them very challenging. And I'm wondering how if the reporting categories allow for eco-modulation to be applied in that circumstance.
So I think what you're pointing to would be every producer reporting at the SKU level. So they would have to report, I guess, product by product. Currently, the proposal is they are providing data into CAA that is broad category types and amount of materials that are processed. It doesn't get into the specifics of, I guess, potentially that example where the styrofoam may be glued onto the box. I think that would require a level of detail that I think might be quite difficult to for producers to report on. And I think may be difficult for us to, at least initially, get that information in. That might be something we could build in over time, but I certainly don't think it's anything we could do in the first few years of operation.
So Caroline, Fort Collins, I guess just to clarify, so would they report in the example of the cardboard with the styrofoam that's glued onto it, would they just report the styrofoam element in their styrofoam category and the cardboard in the cardboard category?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and I guess that it's just one of the things we'll need to think through as we keep moving through in the program. I think, you know, those mixed material packaging they're just so incredibly problematic. And I understand in sort of the scale of all the reporting, it's challenging. And also if we're leveraging EPR as a tool for addressing some of the materials that cause challenges within the systems, perhaps it's something that we can keep on the radar at least.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. It does get into, I mean, I think larger scale questions around, you know, because you could potentially get into then requiring every producer to report on the type of glue adhesive they use for their labels, because we do know labels do create some issues in the recycling process. So I think we're starting with the high level and getting producers to report in. This is going to be a significant undertaking for producers unto itself. Yeah. Rick?
We'll go to Rick next, and I want to encourage those that have not had a chance to speak up here to give some feedback if you can. We've got some really great feedback from a lot of you folks here, but want to know from others what your thoughts are. If you can give your feedback, I'm sure that would be very helpful for CAA. Rick.
Yes, Rick Cater, Swordfish Consulting. We've talked about this when we asked you to provide us with pictures of the items that were on the list. And we did that in many cases so that we could visualize what it is you were talking about. And what Caroline's referring to, if it's an envelope with a little plastic window, that's not as big a problem as if that carton is 30% HDPE on the top of it, and it becomes super problematic. So I assumed we weren't allowing for those types of commingled product builds like that, but we never got to a place, to Caroline's point, or to I think it might have been Elizabeth's, what percent. So we have a carton and it has an HDPE top on it, and it represents about a third of the carton. You're saying they're going to go, hey, the third of the carton has HDPE. I'm going to report that I produce packaging that is HDPE, and the 2/3 of it is paper. They're going by weight, I would imagine, correct?
Correct.
But do you anticipate that we're in a position where we're going to prevent that type of commingling of packaging types, like in the container, by us identifying in the picture that a carton is something that isn't half HDPE? Are we ruling out that from becoming a problem for us?
I think we've tried to create categories to acknowledge the different types of problematic combinations and how those producers would report that information in. I guess I'm trying to just think through, Rick, and I may need to think about this just a little bit. But you're saying potentially if somebody adds something new to that packaging that may create difficulties. Is that?
Well, for your commingling Tetra Pak, which is a highly laminated type of carton, it has it has aluminum, it has all kinds of parts to it. and a carton, which to this day is generally a carton with a little screw top, but they're beginning to start to put big HDPE tops on them for structural integrity, I guess. I don't know. But I'm just saying that we asked you to tell us what a carton looked like so that we could go, hey, a carton that is half HDPE is not what we identified a carton to be. So I was just trying to make sure that we identified that there is that possibility that this carton could become more of HDPE than it is carton. And quite frankly, we didn't mention the fact that if you start putting those Tetra Paks in with carton, would it be a 52 grade of paper? We'd have to ask the paper guys. You've commingled these two as the same product, but are they similarly marketable? If I just made Tetra Pak and tried to sell it to a carton outlet, would they take it as a 52, Peter? I don't know.
So my understanding is there is a specific grade for aseptic and gabletop containers currently that's in place, an industry standard for that material.
Okay, so I wasn't sure of that. I didn't know if 52, that grade, if we just went all out with these little Tetra Paks and that became a bigger part of that fraction, would that be a problem marketing wise?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that question specifically. I don't know, Yuri, if you can answer that question, but we can certainly take it back. But I know that there is a bail for aseptic and gable top cartons. Those are that is an industry standard that's in place.
I'm cool. Thank you. I was worried about the HDPE tops on the cartons. Thank you.
Yuri, anything to add?
No.
Nope. Okay, thank you. Pete, I'd suggest we move to the next topic and see if we can get that done before we take a break.
Okay, sure. Okay, so these are some areas that I think PSI had pointed out, just making sure that we have covered them adequately. So there is the question of how targets for collection and recycling rates are, or how the program plan deals with those. So the requirements in the Act state that we've got to set targets for minimum collection rates and recycling rates for certain types of covered materials, including paper, glass, metal, plastic, that the state will strive to meet by 2030 and 2035. And we have to talk about how we are going to increase those rates after those dates. The equations just on the bottom are how the Act defines collection rate and recycling rate. We've talked about, I think, this before. It's the weight of covered materials collected under the program in a calendar year over the weight of covered materials used for products sold or distributed by producers within or into the state in the same calendar year. I will note very specifically that the requirement around the calendar year and the same calendar year is problematic. That is not how any program works in the world. You don't measure. You always producers are always reporting in the previous year. So there is, I think, just a nuanced point on that as we move forward. But again, the collection and recycling rate are measured are stated to measure in a similar way as part of the legislation. Next slide over. So we have, and Darla, I did not get an opportunity to fix this slide. I am told that I put an earlier version of the needs assessment numbers in here. So I will note that this is really meant to reflect the needs assessment outputs, but the proposal is to use those collection and recycling targets that were based on the average model as part of the needs assessment and by what the Joint Budget Committee approved as part of the scenario. And I will note again, I apologize if I put the wrong numbers in. I was tight on time, and so I didn't recognize the issue until afterwards. But I think they're just slight changes in the numbers. Am I correct in saying that, Wolf?
They're close. So just so everybody is aware, the goals approved by the JVC under the medium scenario for 2030 is 38 to 44%. And for 2035, it's 52 to 58%. So the 2030 goal is a bit more noticeable than the 2035. But yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize. I just I pulled quickly as I was getting ready for the meeting. Unfortunately, we are in the midst of trying to write the program plan as well as managing these meetings. So I apologize. I just ran out of time.
Peter, is there any feedback you want from this?
I guess
from the group
really
for this slide?
Yeah, I guess the question really is are there any concerns with these numbers? We've certainly had discussion around these numbers quite a bit. These were the collection and recycling numbers that were approved as part of the Joint Budget Committee. So again, difficult for us to vary from them based on what was approved, but we wanted to, again, double check with the group to see if there were any concerns or any considerations we needed to provide around these collection and recycling targets. Okay. So that may mean we can have a break early.
Next slide was, remind me here.
That's just the discussion
Just the questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if there's no other questions at this time on the first two items that have been discussed, then we will take a break. So not seeing any hands dart up. Brandon, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Scott. So before we do go into our 5-minute break, we do just want to give the opportunity for a call out here. If anyone from the public would like to make a comment or ask a question on the topic of material reporting categories and targets for minimum collection and minimum recycling rates, please put your name and affiliation in the chat box. And when the public comment period commences after our 5-minute break, you can have an opportunity to engage with the board. And with that, we'll go ahead and we'll jump into the break.
Great. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And I will now turn it over to Brandon for the first public comment period of today's technical work session.
Thank you, Scott. So currently we only have one member of the public that is queued up, but I do want to give everyone an opportunity in case someone didn't hear. We are going to be having a public comment period. Since it's a technical work question, you can either provide just a comment and feedback, or you can ask a question and engage with the board and CAA. So if you'd like to provide comment or ask a question on the topics of targets for minimum collection and minimum recycling rates or material reporting categories, please put your name and affiliation in the chat. I'll call on attendees in the order that the requests were received. And I do just want to remind folks that since we do have limited time, we're going to allow around 2 minutes for each comment. And then the question and answer periods are going to be moderated based on the total number of folks who have opted into the queue, so we can make sure everyone has an opportunity to participate. Now, with that said, I will go ahead and I'll put it over to our first public commenter here, which is Sharon Cody. Sharon, go ahead and unmute, say your name and affiliation, and provide your comment or ask your question.
Hi, Sharon Cody. I'm a producer with Land O'Lakes, and I just wanted to share that from my perspective, when it comes to reporting, it's easier to have more categories, and here's why. Because we only have one database for reporting, and it's based on our specifications and our sales data. So we have to categorize each one of those pieces of packaging with one category. And then later, if there's something different between the states, if let's say category A is equal to, for Oregon or another state, I need to add category A and B together, I can do that. But if I have to later split something out from a category, then I don't have the visibility to it. So I'm not sure if that makes sense to you, but that's the way it'll work in our system because it goes off of specifications. The other thing I wanted to add is on your comment about styrofoam glued to corrugate. That's an example where if we received in the package like that, it would only have one weight. If we received in the styrofoam, that's a weight. And then if we received in the corrugate, that would be a weight. And then if our plant glued it together, then I would have the visibility to those two separate weights. So without that, it would have to go into a mixed category. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And we do not have any other members of the public who have joined the queue. We will have another public comment period on our next two topics later on in the meeting. But for now, I'll go ahead and I'll pass it back to you, Scott.
Great. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Sharon, for your valuable input as well. Appreciate it. Okay, advisory board, we're now going to move on to the third topic of today's technical work session, which is offsets for producer dues, non-MRF covered materials collection, and exceedance of recycling rates. So for this topic, Pete has just one slide before we're all going to go into a proposed approach and then have a discussion. So this will be a little shorter here, but maybe the discussion will be as extensive. Over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Scott. Again, these are areas that I think were identified that we just wanted to make sure that we had clearly covered. We have talked about both the next two topics in some detail, but again, we wanted to make sure that we were covering them. So as part of the requirements, we have to describe how CA will reduce or offset the producer responsibility dues for any producer or group of producers that fund or operate a collection program that covers a specific type of cover material that is not processed by material recovery facilities and that has recycling rates that meet or exceed the minimum recycling rate target set forth in the plan proposal pursuant to subsection 4P. If we just move one slide forward, So this could include, and again, we haven't really provided an exhaustive list here, but it would be obviously materials that are currently not on the minimum recyclables list, meaning they don't have to be collected statewide in equivalent fashion to trash collection. So that could be some of the stuff we've talked about already, like spiral wound containers or coffee cups or squeezable tubes or opaque PET thermoforms. So we are looking at really more of an application type of process where the producer or producers would need to provide specific information back to us describing the program itself, the scope of materials that are included, what their geographic boundaries are, how they're funding that program, history, performance indicators, including verifiable recycling rates, and assurance that those materials are being managed at responsible end markets. We may need, in this circumstance, the need for SKU level reporting. We're just having some internal conversations about that. So again, it would be more of an application type of process. We are looking at how we would limit due reduction, so how much that producer could reduce their dues. We still need to make sure that the system we are still able to fund the system that's in place. So we need to make sure that there are some limitations around the amount of reduction that potentially could happen with specific dues. And really, that's sort of the approach that is being proposed. Again, application process. So you could have a producer that is set up their own collection system within Colorado. Maybe that's some form of retail take back or something along those lines. But again, they would need to move forward with an application-based process for us to reduce that producer's dues.
So are there any comments or questions for Pete on this section? Because that's really the one slide. So we have Scott DeFife and then Liz.
Thank you, Scott DeFife, Glass Packaging. Sorry, I missed the first part of the meeting. Is this the place where communities that have existing drop-off or other collection that's outside the primary single stream also, do they need to also sort out an application process if they're taking stuff directly to processing and skipping the rest of the system? Or do the producers need to do that application to make sure that the material that's being collected outside the rest of the typical system is accounted for? Part B of my question would be, if a set of producers, is this also appropriate where a set of producers may cause to create a pilot program or another program that's going to collect what would otherwise be covered material, but collect it from places that would be exempt from service or exempt from the fees, but collecting material that would otherwise be covered might apply. It's okay if some other entity's doing this project, but in order for the producer to get some sort of offset on their fees, they've got to make application to the pro for that. Is that really what you're saying? It's about the fees that the producers have to pay, less than the integration of the program with the rest of what CAA is doing.
Yeah, Scott, maybe if we just go back one slide, the requirement is about reducing or offsetting producer responsibility for any producer or group that fund or operate a collection program that covers materials that are not on that are not processed by material recycling recovery facilities. So I would assume that would mean definitely they are not on either one of the lists. I guess they potentially could be on the additional materials list because they may be just collected at drop-off types of locations, but are not going through material recovery facilities, and then they need to meet or exceed the recycling rate target that is in the plan.
Okay, so for material that is otherwise in any way, shape, or form touching a MRF, they can't.
They wouldn't be able to avail themselves. So if it was glass particularly, then they wouldn't be able to. I guess you could look potentially at ceramics. If you had a specific recycling program in place for ceramics, I guess potentially that could potentially qualify.
Okay.
Liz?
Thank you, Scott. Liz?
Hopefully my noise is better, reduced. Okay.
Yeah.
Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. So as I'm reading this, Peter, just to clarify for me, for example, expanded polystyrene is not currently accepted at material facilities. And if the producers of that type of packaging wanted to create a standalone collection and processing system, they would be eligible to make an application the way you have proposed. Do I understand that part correctly?
Correct. So for polystyrene, they would need to meet or exceed the target for rigid plastics, would be the example. Yeah. Yeah.
My follow-up question is, are there examples of this outside of this system that you could use as a demonstration case?
I think there's lots of examples potentially where producers may have some form of take back that might meet or exceed. I don't know, you could have, I guess, potentially a brewery that charges a deposit on the rigid plastic drink, the 6-pack ring, sort of the HDP ring. And I guess potentially they could collect those back and be able to meet or exceed the rigid plastic target that's in place for the program. You could have I mean, you know, like the used oil containers could be an example where, you know, a program like that is being proposed by the lubricant. Oh, I always get it. Whatever, LPMA, I always get their name wrong. They could potentially propose something separate. Those are materials that wouldn't go through a material recycling facility. And they could prove that they meet or exceed that target.
Thank you, Liz. Scott?
Sorry, the Scott to 5 class packaging, the answer to Liz's question, I think spurred me to maybe ask I think Pete got it my first thing and shot that one down. So we can't set up a separate collection system and reduce the fees for the glass producers by setting up a separate collection system, because that stuff's all got to go to MRFs. What about small fraction material stuff? So we need to, this is a program for people that are not otherwise on the mandatory recyclables list. Maybe they're on yellow, maybe they're on red, but they're not on green. So the minimum list, right? So what about the small fraction material, the smaller stuff that is not acceptable, not deemed recyclable by going through the MRFs and things like that, but we know where it is. and we figure out how to get it out of the stream before it goes to landfill.
So Scott, I mean, there's a bit of a legal interpretation question here that I feel a little bit uncomfortable answering. I was not at the table when this legislation was written, so not processed by material recovery facilities. I think I'd leave it to CDPHE potentially to weigh in on that, but I think there's obviously a concern in the sense that CA's budget will need to pay for the system that's in place. And so if we are reducing the dues of producers, for example, for small format glass, if that was the case, those other producers of the larger format glass that are being recycled still need to ensure that they're covering the system costs for recycling glass, collecting and recycling glass within the system.
I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clarifying. I'm talking about non-glass, small format materials that end up in the stream.
Oh, small format. Yeah. So you're thinking like tags or something like that might be collected. I don't know, bread.
Pens, tubes, COVID tests, things that aren't on the acceptable list, but they're small and end up in the system and somehow, or caps, bottle caps, that get separated from their primary package, things like that.
So
I would argue that my interpretation of this, and CDPHE might have to opine on this in the future, is that if a group of producers of stuff that's covered anyhow figured out a better way to do a mousetrap and get covered material handled in a cheaper, more efficient way than running everything through single stream MRF, that would be allowable for an offset anyhow. But the CAA interpretation seems to be no on that. So we may need to ask that question of the legal of the law interpreters as well. But my second example was not small format glass, but other small format stuff that is rigid plastic, HDPE, PP, polypropylene, PET, whatever, but too small to fit. It's going to not get captured at the MRFs, but it is going to end up in the glass stream.
Yeah, so Scott, I think those are materials currently right now that are identified within the plan as not materials that would be captured. So I think that would fit. They're not materials that would be pushed through. So I think those would be the types of materials that potentially would get could set up a separate program
for credit. Okay, thanks. Great.
Clinton.
Steve or Scott, maybe this will help from my perspective. So Clean Standard A1 Organics, sorry. So would this set up the opportunity for, say, compostable package manufacturers to set up a program of collection and processing and have them fund it themselves so that they could since they're not on the list and they're not being collected, they could set it up, fund it up, and make sure that it's exceeding the rates set by your standards for compostable packaging?
I mean, my initial read, Clinton, and again, I would lean to Wolf to respond to that, but I don't think that I think compostable packaging is dealt with differently under the Act, and so I don't think that this same piece would apply to compostables.
Okay.
Okay, Wolf, bring the tablets down from the mountain here. Let us know what they say.
Okay, I'll do my best. So, yes, this is a great question, and I can't speak to the legislative intent either on this one, but based on other parts of the Act and the "and" in this requirement, right? Because that's a very important thing, that it's covered material not processed at a MRF and has recycling rates that exceed the minimum rate target. So it's getting captured, it's getting recycled, it's just not going through a MRF. There is an opportunity in the act and in our regs for an individual program plan. And that seems to be an appropriate link here, right? When you've got something that's being collected and being diverted and being recycled, i.e. a hard to recycle material through an individual program plan, that's one potential fit here. CDPHE has had some discussions with LPMA, who is looking at doing a separate collection for oil containers. Obviously, that's something that could not go to a MRF. That would be a contaminant. But if there's an opportunity to divert and recycle that material in a separate matter, that may be one potential example of what we're talking about here, what was intended. So yeah, some background info.
Okay. Lots to chew on this one, and we will certainly have more follow-ups. There still is some areas that we just want to make sure we're abundantly clear on around how they operate. So the fun of legal discussions. Okay, if we could move just 2 slides forward, or maybe 3 slides forward. If we can move into the next topic, yeah. Specifically dealing with the legislation does require that CA work with and incentivize producers to reduce packaging of products using covered materials through design changes and the development or expansion of systems for reusable packaging and product innovation. So we did cover this as part of our discussion around increasing circularity, and largely talked about this as being sort of on the reuse refill slide. But if we move 1 slide forward, we did talk about first a push on the education outreach side to highlight the benefits of reuse and refill systems. And again, this being part of it, of ensuring that as part of the communication that CA is putting out there as part of the recycling system, also talking about the opportunities that lay with reuse and refill systems. We would look at, as part of the modulation, the dues and the eco-modulation side, we would provide an advantage to reuse and refill covered materials. So obviously there aren't producer dues associated with reuse and refill covered materials. And then we'd look potentially to establish an eco-modulation factor to reduce dues, to recognize designs for reuse and refill of covered materials and where high refill rates may be in place. We would look again to implement eco-modulation factors in a phased approach to influence design choices that producers are made. And then we would consider partnerships related to producer guidance materials. And so I don't think this is necessarily something that CA needs to reinvent the wheel on. There are lots of other organizations that are out there that are doing work around helping companies to make better design choices around their products. And we would look to work with those organizations to make sure that information is available to participating producers so that they can look at ways to improve the circularity of the packaging that they're putting into the marketplace. And then next slide, and I think we just move more into sort of questions. Are there any other suggestions relating to incenting design changes and innovation? And do you have any concerns with the approach that we are suggesting?
This is the last topic for today, so gather up the strength. Caroline, then Scott Fife, and then Clinton. Caroline?
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. So it looks like the education and the outreach. Could you go to the previous slide, please? I guess so. It seems like this education and outreach is focused on the public as opposed to the producers. Is that sort of a I guess, is that the gap that CAA is looking to fill within this? And I know it's not the only tool in there, but I just wanted to make sure that we're trying to encourage the public to do reuse and refill systems, or is CAA more working with the producers on the reuse and refill systems?
So I think the first bullet is really focused around public and education that CAA can get out to the public. The next three are really producer focused. So it's looking at both what we can do from a public perspective, but also what we can do to influence producers, whether that be through the dues that they pay, or whether that be through the types of guidance materials we provide access to them on.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure it was sort of that dual prong approach of both public and working with the producers. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Scott?
Scott to Fife, glass packaging. I think you're on to the right places where you have the ability within the current system to incentivize the reuse and refill. It's somewhat difficult because there isn't anything in the law itself that, requires or incent or has a goal. There is no specific reuse target or anything like that in there. And given that the reusable packaging would have to meet a definition of being designed, to be reused several times through the system, and a system has to be built, they'd have to be the producers, in order to get relieved of their dues, would have to fund a system to do the take back and reuse refill, right, on their own, almost begging for what Wolf talked about, the independent or the alternative. I can't remember what the magic words were, but
individual program plan.
Individual program plan. Is that just on but a collection of producers could get together to do an individual program plan, or is that just one producer does an individual program plan?
Could be either, I think.
So you'd have to get a group of producers together to implement an individual program plan saying, we're going to help build a reuse refill system, and we're going to have our packaging fit that system in order to get out of the fees. If that's the path you take with the fees.
Well, no, I mean, there's already potentially reuse refill systems that are in place already, where those systems are already operating. So, there's those types of systems that are in place for refillable pressurized cylinders that would already have.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was thinking about otherwise covered material that didn't already have a reuse refill system. I mean, there's dairy milk in glass, but there's not beer refill in glass or soda refill in glass or things like that. So,
in Colorado. Yeah.
In Colorado. Yeah.
Yeah. So if they put that system into place, Scott, they wouldn't need an independent program plan. They could put that system in place, and they would no longer have to pay into the recycling system.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott. Clinton, you had your hand up before, then brought it down.
Yeah, Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. Well, the one, this is just a side note. I'm just wondering, where does reduce fit into this? Like, ultimately, don't we want to reduce the types of packaging we're creating, or incentivize less is more? So I'm just wondering where that fits into this. And then my second thought was, not to play devil's advocate, but if we are going to be putting out education and outreach activities and printing them on pamphlets, stickers, calendars, and signage that's not recyclable, aren't we kind of not following our own path because we're producing more waste that can't be recycled. Just sorry. we got to follow the right path and make sure if we produce something for effective education that it can be actually recycled too, because that's the whole point. Sorry, just throwing that out there.
Sorry, Clinton, do you mean that a reusable bottle is potentially not recyclable? Is that?
No, what I was saying, one thing is like, shouldn't we be promoting or pushing producers to reduce the amount of types of packaging they put out versus like, do we need 4 things to create how we package this product versus just 1, because it's a material that can be recycled very well and very quickly and very easily. So like pushing that side of the world. But then also what I was saying is if we're putting out educational materials to promote reuse and refill systems, or even the EPR, we should definitely be producing that material on recycled content or content that can be recycled is what I'm saying. Do you follow me?
I think so. I mean, I think, when we talk about some of the producer guidance materials that are out there, I think there is discussions that include, reduction in the amount of components and reduction in elements that may create issues. There is always the balance of reducing the materials when potentially some of your reuse refill may be more durable so that they actually have more weight associated with them. And there is also some issues, certainly as you lightweight certain materials. I think probably the MRF side could speak to this, but you do also start to run into some issues when it comes to the recyclability of that, because the sorting of that material, a plastic bottle that's lightweighted to such an extent may act more like a paper in a MRF, and that does create some challenges as well. But I think, again, we would look towards working with some of those organizations that are in this space already that are providing some of this guidance and making sure that we're providing producers with more robust information. Ideally, I think, as the gentleman from CTO talked about, I mean, ideally, you're moving everybody to accepting bonuses, eco-modulation bonuses, because you want people to, again, move in the right direction around how their packaging is being developed.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah, thank you. I forgot about the bonuses. I forgot about that part. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm hearing, Clinton, you're sort of asking a little bit also about, and I think I'm hearing this, uniform standards for certain products. Like the Europeans have been discussing this as well, Pete, as you know, in terms of the regulatory, like, can there be a movement towards some uniformity of the products for recyclability or even reusability, if it helps everybody together? And I know that there's quite a lot around competition and marketing around this, but I was hearing a little bit of that. No,
yeah,
Clinton,
there's
in your
a little bit. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's. Am I still muted? Yeah, similar to that. I mean, like there's always been a big pushback on certified compostables where, they want their branding, they want their look, they want their image, they want what can be on there because it's their branding. Let's pick a large company, but I think that ship is starting to change so that they can utilize, say it's BPI certified. They put that on their packaging, which sends a message of sustainability because they're providing a certification of a package that now can be compostable. That's their package. But before, that was a hard lift to add a different color to their branding because, you're affecting their branding. But I think that change is shifting. And so, again, like you were saying, Scott, there, uniformity and reduce should be always at the top of the list. Let's reduce, and then we can use what we have and recycle it for beneficial. And it's like glass, man. Glass 100% recyclable. Holy cow. Great option. But I'll stop. I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay, just wanted to raise that. The other thing I was hearing you say was about this is more something else, right? It's about requirements for the educational materials that are being used to be,
Yes.
somehow fit into the system. And so
Right.
that's an interesting question. I just throw that out to the group. If they're here, I don't know what remedies there are if someone comes up with a marketable, marketing materials education, unless it's required somehow. But that's what I heard you also discussing.
Yeah. Well, immediately when I look at calendars and stickers, they are not going to be recycled. So why put them back into the
There
system?
you go. You're giving us more problems to think about. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'll stop. I'll stop.
So sorry, can sorry, I think did you say calendars can't be recycled?
Well, I think it depends on how those calendars are manufactured, but if you have multiple wires and all things, well, maybe I'm wrong. I need to ask someone else on this call that is more familiar with calendars, and maybe I shouldn't call them out specifically, but I'm just saying is the type of signage, educational print collateral that we're putting back into the market to advertise this program should be required to be able to be recycled within its program.
Gotcha.
Don't be putting out something that can't be recycled.
Okay, yeah, and I do think, I mean, I don't know, my experience with waste calendars, which are typically produced by service providers or municipal governments, those are typically recyclable. They don't generally have metal associated with them or anything like that. They tend to be just sheets of paper that can be recycled. I guess stickers is another question unto itself, but there is that other question about how do we make sure we get messages across to the resident if to make sure that they're addressing other contamination issues that might be associated with that container.
Yeah, and again, I didn't mean to go down that path, but I think it's important. So
point taken.
Yeah.
All right, Pete, I think you have one more slide. We probably have covered it anyway. Brandon, next slide here. So I don't know if there's anything else that people have, any other questions or comments you have that you'd like to make on this topic. So seeing none, then let's see. So I'm going to now turn it over to Brandon for the second and last public comment period. As I mentioned before, it's on the third and fourth topics that we just went through. And Brandon, over to you, please.
Thank you, Scott. So once again, if anyone from the public is interested in providing a comment or asking a question on the topics of offsets for producer dues, non-MRF covered materials collection, exceedance of recycling rates, and producer collaboration to incentivize design change, please submit your name and organization in the chat, and I'll call on attendees in the order that those requests were received. Since we do have limited time, we're only going to allow for about 2 minutes for each comment. Although actually looking at the time here, we'll probably have a little bit more leniency there. But question and answer periods are going to be moderated based on the total number of individuals in the queue, so we can make sure everyone has the chance to participate. So I do see our first commenter here. So we have Peter Bierbaum. Give me just a moment, Peter. I'm going to give you the opportunity to unmute. Go ahead and unmute, Peter, say your affiliation, and either provide your feedback or ask your question.
Yes, Peter Bierbaum with One World Resource. I just want to say I appreciate the effort on creating consistency on the list between states. I think that's going to help producers, but I'd also think it's going to result in improvement to recycling and composting too, with consistency between states. It appears the small category is an attempt to align with California's small category. And if so, I would just note that in California, the paper and fiber small category is identified as recyclable on the California list. So I don't know if the Colorado list is intentionally different, but just want to make that connection. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And we have Sharon Cody as our next public commenter here. Sharon, in just a moment, I'm going to give you the opportunity to unmute. You should have the ability now. Go ahead, Sharon.
Sharon Cody, Land O'Lakes producer. I just want to say when it comes to reuse, that the reason why so many people, well, first of all, before I even get into that, I just want to say it looks like in this provision that there's no onboarding or on-ramping of new packages to reuse. And what I mean by that is, yeah, there are some closed loop systems out there that currently are using reuse, but that's where it only seems to apply. So when it's new, how do you prove that you're getting these high refill rates? How long does it take to prove that? Or is it just science, benchtop testing that proves that? And I just want to say that it seems like the pro or the law doesn't give any provision to help create that infrastructure, because that's the biggest problem with reuse right now with all the CPGs is lots of people have done pilots, but when it comes to that next step of trying to scale it, there's not enough infrastructure because consumers won't do it unless it's convenient, very highly convenient. So that means a lot of drop-off places. So if without that, I just think it's pretty big ask to think that producers can do that alone.
Thank you, Sharon. So far, it was just Peter and Sharon who have opted into the queue here. We can wait just a moment, see if anybody else wants to join the queue by putting their name and affiliation into the chat. But otherwise, Scott, if we don't see anything in the next minute or so, I think we can move on and we can go into the meeting summary.
Well, I know this group likes to have some time to themselves out of the multiple hours of meetings. So I am now going to move into the end here. So thank you very much, Brandon, for that. And I want to thank the public commenters as well. It's great comments that we get from you. I want to thank Pete and Yuri for the CAA presentations today. And, of course, thank all the board members for the great questions. There's always a lot of information presented, and your questions really help to clarify all of it and to give the feedback to CAA moving forward. So as a follow-up, PSI will compile all of the board's feedback from today, the comments, and follow-up from Circular Action Alliance team. And that draft feedback will be saved in the advisory board shared folder. Our next technical work session will be on November 25th, and we will discuss topics for that work session during our next regularly scheduled business meeting of the advisory board, and that's on November 13th. So November 13th is the next regular business meeting. November 25th is the next technical work session. And the meeting recording for today's meeting will be posted on the EPR webpage within the next few days. So members of the public, stakeholders, advisory board, everyone that's here, thank you very much. I want to close by thanking you for the third time. This meeting of the technical work session, the sixth technical work session, is now closed at 2:51 Mountain Time. Thanks so much. Take care.